A good night's rest can be very refreshing and even lead to pleasant dreams that stretch human imagination. But for some people, they lead to nothing but sweet dreams of madness. We're talking about Nightmare Reaper.
Fresh out the oven.
Nightmare Reaper is a retro-ish first-person shooter with random elements by Blazing Bit Games, and is only their second fully released title, which is surprising considering just what you got here. Their first game was a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up with some RPG stuff thrown in the mix, called Mactabulous from way back in 2011, and while it's fine for what it is, it wasn't exactly anything that I would call special. Nightmare Reaper, on the other hand, is quite the larger project, one that I somehow managed to sink around 25 hours into without ever really noticing. Holy crap. What's most surprising about that is that I found the start of the game to be a really slow burn. It's not till around mid-game where the really fun stuff starts to kick in. You get double jumping, dash dodging, free use of grapple hooks, and even nuclear weapons that begin to become available. Many of these are hidden deep within the game's upgrade system, and without them, the early game comes off as a bit too basic and familiar. But I digress. Plot-wise, like most shooters, there isn't a ton to work with. Players take on the role of some lady trapped within a mental institution who is going through an experimental therapy routine in an attempt to be cured of her ills. The treatment is simple. Go to sleep and literally fight your inner demons to the bitter end. The main problem with this setup is the annoying downtime in between levels. You only fight things while sleeping, and in between that time period, players find themselves waking up back in the asylum without much of a guide on what to do. There are some secrets to uncover if you can find the correct thing to interact with at the correct time to unlock them, sometimes literally with a few of these interactables being keys, but a lot of this stuff can be easy to miss. All of this is only if you even want to explore in the first place. Nothing forces exploration, but players are forced back into the asylum between levels or after deaths, having to re-interact with a bed in your room just to get back to the action. Downtime in a fast-paced FPS like Nightmare Reaper can be a good thing, otherwise players will start to feel overwhelmed and get tired of all the fighting, but levels already have a somewhat built-in downtime to them. Levels are broken up into cordoned-off areas with doors between them, letting you clear out the current batch of enemies before setting off to the next. Enemies also drop weapons and cash when they die, and there are random events that can happen when all of the enemies in a room are killed. This creates a cycle of bursting into a room, killing everything, cleaning up the loot, or dealing with a random event before bursting into the next room to do it all over again. It's a flow that feels natural, unlike forcing players out of the main game only for them to have to re-enter it half a second later. It's not the only way to spend your time either. Nightmare Reaper's upgrade system is broken up into 3 different skill trees, each represented by its own minigame. Basic currency goes into the skill tree upgrade system, where you buy access to levels of a platform game. Collecting Topaz currency gains access to a Pokemon-like minigame, while Jade can be used to get into a shoot-'em-up style minigame. Each of these wears their inspirations on their sleeve and are rather basic for what they are. On their own, none of them can stand out all that much to the point that there's an option to just turn them off and buy upgrades on their own without having to finish any platforming level or knock off Pokemon battle first. Personally, I always use these as a bit of a way to take a break from the main game, as the main game ends up being a lot longer than I expected, and can quickly get chaotic towards the end. Nightmare Reaper is constantly adding new enemies and expanding on mechanics, but weapons are the real star of the show. You start with a pistol and a knife. There's nothing very special about it, but the knife can be thrown and you can put a silencer on the pistol. Later on, you'll find yourself a M1 Garand with a bayonet or a sword and shield, and you think, okay, this is a nice variety of stuff to work with. But that's not even the half of it. Before you know it, you'll be fighting spell books that launch giant fireballs, a plasma gun that can't decide how it wants to shoot, a smart gun that can be placed like a turret, shuriken that can be smashed together to fire a really large shuriken, a freaking chainsaw with a grappling hook, along with magic swords, magic axes, a bazooka, a Mega Saw that you can basically ride around on the ground to move faster, a minigun, a gun that shoots bees or a beehive that'll home in on enemies, and I can go on and on and on. That's not to mention the quality system, where higher quality weapons have additional bonuses where they can freeze enemies, burn enemies, shock enemies, suck the life out of enemies, fire faster, fire slower, use twice as much ammo per shot. That one's not so good. And even have a randomized projectile letting the gun fire just about anything that is in the game. Finding a solid weapon with a good mix of positive attributes is just like Christmas morning, and it can quickly turn a bad run into an overpowered cakewalk, as long as you don't end up killing yourself with it. I've heard plenty of stories of people finding overpowered and ridiculous weapons in this game, and while I personally didn't come across anything too broken with my time with the game, the potential is there. One of the more interesting things I came across was an SMG that used my health for ammo instead of bullets, but it also had lifesteal on it that gave me the health right back. The only problem with it is that lifesteal isn't automatic and instead causes health pickups to drop, causing me to get to a point where I couldn't out-heal the damage I was taking fast enough. Luckily, by that time I'd found a saw blade launcher with even more lifesteal and an increased fire rate. This was after the point where I got a free-to-use grapple hook that didn't need a chainsaw attached to it, meaning I could grapple over to an enemy, use the alt-fire to spin the saw instead of firing it to cut them down while being in range to grab all the health before moving on to the next enemy. It was a very successful strategy, even as levels became more and more archaic. Nightmare Reaper uses a randomized level system, which is fine till it starts to fall apart. Once players get access to the free use grapple hook and levels start taking place in more outdoor vertical areas, it can be easy to see around the game's barriers. I never found a way to break a level by going somewhere I wasn't supposed to due to force fields keeping players in bounds, but that doesn't mean you can't take advantage of this. There are some rather open levels that let you see into rooms that haven't been opened up yet, allowing you to take some pot shots from a safe distance before that door cracks open and everything starts to rush you. The worst part of this system is when you deal with specific room clear events. Room clear events can either be good or bad. The good are shops where you can buy and sell weapons or change around weapon stats, along with what is basically a slot machine or even a Dance Dance Revolution type minigame thing. You can also find a mop that you can use to clean up bloodstains for money. It's kind of slow to do and not really worth it, but it's, well, I mean, you can do it if you want. The bad things are where stuff starts to get annoying. If a big red orb shows up, that means you're in for a world of pain. This thing can either cause crystals to fall from the sky and right onto your head, an immortal ghost head to show up and follow you around in order to jump scare you and take some of your health away, or do one of the worst things possible: invert gravity at seemingly random. It's not too bad if you're in a level that happens to have a ceiling, but not all of them do. One particular late-game level took place in some kind of eldritch Lovecraftian dimension that was already difficult enough to navigate due to it being made up of floating islands. Throw inverted gravity into the mix, and I spent a lot of the time stuck in the sky trying to figure out how to get back down to solid ground. If you can find the red orb that's causing these things to happen and destroy it, they will stop. But being stuck in the ceiling can make trying to do this a bit more complicated. This is part of what I mean when I say that I'm surprised at how long the game really is. There are a plethora of themes throughout the whole thing that feel like they go on and on and on. One batch of levels you're in a cave, the next you're in a sewer, the next a factory, before ending up in a post-apocalyptic frozen cityscape, and then the before-mentioned eldritch dimension. There are multiple times where the game felt like it was going to end, but it just didn't. And this is even without me dying all that much. If you die, you have to restart a level as there aren't any quick saves, which can make the game last even longer. But without dying a ton, it's still pretty dang long. There's even a New Game Plus option available after the final boss, with hints of a second and third New Game Plus as well. What doesn't help is the game's general art design. Nightmare Reaper has a serious problem with bloom, and that's even after it's been toned down throughout its early access period. You can tone it down even more with the options menu, but by default it can be a little aggressive. While I like the pixelated textures and how enemies sometimes act like they are 2D by falling over like a slice of paper, the bloom and amount of stuff crammed onto the screen at one time can be, well, a bit much. Add to that the blood effects of using a weapon with blood bullets, like the SMG I mentioned before, and I had to turn off some of the graphics options just to be able to see what's going on. Late-game enemies can easily crowd you to the point that the only real option is to hold down the fire button and hope, which doesn't exactly feel all that fair in a game with randomized levels, loot, and enemy placement. This can be worse when dealing with champion enemies who are gigantic bullet sponges and can randomly be any enemy in a level, sometimes even showing up multiple times in the same room. This causes it to be very easy to die before you even know what hit you or even what killed you. Overall, Nightmare Reaper can be a fun little shooter. Its strengths are its weapons and mechanic variety, but these are hidden behind upgrades and skill check walls that some may not have enough interest to climb. The funnest weapons don't show up till mid to late game, and considering how long this game lasts, that'll take a while. Plus, movement mechanics like dashing and double jumping aren't in the early game, causing it to feel a bit rudimentary. While at the end of every level, you'll be allowed to pick one weapon to keep while everything else gets sold, and that can be upgraded to be 2, 3, or even 4 weapons to keep on you, there's no way to guarantee that you'll find the ammo you need for them, especially when you're stuck to only one, and with the game's randomness, you have no idea when anything else will drop, nor what it'll be or what attributes it might have. There are 2 things to keep in mind, however. Usually, if you die and re-enter a level, you'll start with whatever you saved from the last level. But if you sold that weapon and then died, you'll restart with absolutely nothing. Secondly, it's possible, if not rare, to pick up a weapon as your corpse hits the ground when you die. This will allow you to restart the level with an extra weapon, whatever you saved from the last level and whatever you just picked up while dead. I was never able to figure out how to do this on purpose, but it was always helpful when it happened. Other than that, Nightmare Reaper is a mixed bag of fun weapons and awkward level design with some annoying mechanics peppered on top. When the game is good, it's really good, and when it's bad, it can feel like a disjointed mess. I'd still recommend it to fans of FPS games regardless, and due to the random nature of Nightmare Reaper, everyone's experience will be a little bit different, and yours just may be more interesting than mine. Thanks for watching, I've been MegapieMan. Let me know what you think of the game or this video in the comments section, and I will talk to you guys later. Want to see more of my stuff? Click on the link on the left for Land of War: The Beginning, a World War II shooter set at the start of the war in Poland. Or click on the right for Pumpkin Jack, a title that looks like a Halloween game, but could possibly be a Christmas game instead.
Ew.